This program is brought to you by the HStvzim She Leads project with support from Embassy of Ireland in Pretoria. Hello viewers, welcome to yet another edition of the Rebound series. My name is Farai Mwakutuya and it is great that you are joining us. Today we are focusing on COVID-19 and the impact that it has had on women, and particularly those that are engaged in business. We obviously know that it has been disruptive, it has had an impact on people's cash flows and livelihoods, and today's program is focusing on just how much impact it has had on women-led businesses and what's being done to address that. This program, I must tell you, is being brought to you by the HStvzim She Leads project with support from the Embassy of Ireland in Pretoria. Now, my first guest on this program is none other than the Honourable Minister of Women's Affairs, Community, Small and Medium Enterprises Development, Honourable Dr. Tsvangirai. Great to have you on the program, Honourable.
Thank you.
Let's get straight into it, Honourable. As I've mentioned, COVID-19 has obviously not spared businesses, and in particularly women-led businesses. We know that a lot of women are engaged in small and medium and informal businesses. So would like to find out, just as a ministry, what has been done to address the impact that has been had by this pandemic on women businesses?
I think the ministry has done a lot, but before I get to that, I think I would like the public to really take note that sometimes we underplay the role that women take when we have a crisis. When you have a crisis like this, or a pandemic like we are having right now, the woman is so overburdened. She is the one that has to make sure that she thinks about what the family will eat that day. She has to think about where the children, will they go to school? Will anyone have somewhere to sleep? Is there enough in the home for everything that keeps a life going? So that should be our starting point. This is why you have a lot of women, therefore, go outside the home to try and make ends meet, to try and make an extra dollar, or in addition to what a man may be bringing. And a lot of women are heading their own families, and some, they may not be heading their families, but they are complementing the salary in the home is so critical. And a lot of people never think about that. They take women for granted. So the ministry, therefore, has done a lot to try and support these women. We have got an online communication, an open line that women, SMEs can just call in, they can just contact the ministry for anything that they need, be it training, guidance, markets, or financial. And financially, which is, I think, what most people are interested in, I'm sure you are aware that His Excellency and Cabinet approved a 500 million cushion for SMEs. And we have made sure that this is distributed equitably between men and women within the ministry. But apart from the 500 million, which is dispersed through the Women's Micro Finance Bank and SMETCO, we also have other funds that the ministry is administering. And we have been monitoring and following and administering these funds very tightly and making sure we also record the impact of these funds on women and on families, but also on the community, the jobs they create and the jobs they sustain, because that is very important. Women are major job creators. Quiet as we are, but we are carrying this economy on our shoulders.
Indeed, I think the points you raise obviously about following up and monitoring very critical. But before I even get to that, one might want to know this figure that you've spoken about, 500 million, is it adequate for all the needs that women have?
This figure is not adequate. I'm sure you are aware that no resources could ever be adequate. But I think that I want to thank His Excellency and also Treasury. They've been able to disperse this fund, and people, despite the lockdown, despite the problems the constraints that are facing the nation, we have been able to disperse quite a lot from this fund, both through the Women's Bank and also through SMEDCO. Let me just mention other funds apart from the Women's Bank. We've got the Women's Development Fund and also the Women's Community Fund. And all these funds have dispersed sizable amounts to women.
What people might want to know, how accessible are these funds? Do they get to the grassroots? Because, perhaps one requires to be in an urban center to be able to get to a bank branch or to come to your offices here in Harare. What is the distribution? Are they going to all the women regardless of where they are in this country?
These funds are going to all women, regardless of their location. Like, for instance, in June, I was in Berengwa, where we distributed the funds together with the Women's Bank to 60 groups. And then there were other groups in Churugwe, in Mutare, and even in Kai, we have had some groups receiving some funding. This is nationwide. Suffice to say, the constraint is the lockdown. If there was no lockdown, we really would have done a lot more than we have done. We have done or than we are doing. We are constrained by the restrictive measures to travel, to connect, to meet, because we work in groups in order to avoid charging or asking women for collateral. But
Indeed.
Apart from that, we have done quite a sizable number of disbursements to women.
That point you've just mentioned of collateral, I was just coming to that because a lot of the time, and previously on this program, we've spoken to women who've decried the fact that collateral, whenever they go to these places, they're asked for collateral, for security, which perhaps they may not have. As you mentioned, they may not be heading households, for instance, so may not have collateral security. What is being done to address that? Because it's a long-standing thing, not just COVID, but even before COVID, women have been saying we are hamstrung because of this issue. What is your ministry doing to address that?
Our ministry is responsible for community development, as well as small and medium enterprises and cooperatives. And we want these three to work together in harmony. So what we have done is that we have realized that women don't have a physical, material collateral. But women have got really practice what we call solidarity economy. So we are building onto that solidarity economy. And world over, solidarity economy has worked wonders. And they have demonstrated this solidarity economy through their women's clubs, through their savings and credit unions, and so forth. So the bank has also learned from that. And we are saying at this micro level, micro to small, as long as you are exercising or practicing solidarity economy, you will be funded. That will be your collateral. That you are working in a group of three that are in business partnership. You may not necessarily do the same project, but you are saying together, we are having 3 projects, but we will start with Mandlovu's project. When she's successful, we will then come and do Madube's project. When she's successful, we'll then come and do Mrs. Ngosho's project. This kind of solidarity has made women succeed. And I can give you concrete examples in Harare here, where women have come together to make bricks, to do brick molding. They started with one woman who succeeded and bought her machines. They went to the other. Now they're a partnership of 3. When bulk bricks are needed, they work together and they deliver. And therefore, we are saying this also builds the nation. It builds the national fabric. And I think Zimbabwe, we have become too much individualistic and sometimes too compartmentalized. And I think my ministry is driving the mending and the building of the social fabric through solidarity economy. Let's work together. Let's trust each other. Okay, let's give each other the space. Have your space. But within your space, make sure that you in solidarity with others to succeed, so that together the economies of scale then will push the communities and push women into better economic production, better economic levels.
I like that solidarity economy you've just spoken about, but as you quite rightly say, it's individualism, but there are many things that also stand to divide us. So what I would be quite interested in knowing is young women, older women. I think it's a lot easier, I would imagine, for older women who are like-minded, have grown up together in these communities, lived together for years, and so trust each other in that way and are able to go into business together. What happens to the younger women? Are they able to participate in this as well? Is there space for them, and how is it going with particularly younger women?
You will be surprised that, my ministry is also really advocating for the digital and generational gap, that we need to bridge these two, the digital and the generational gap. And what we have found is that women, when you bring them together, they have a lot in common. It doesn't matter whether you are young or old. But I agree with you. The younger women may want to do things differently. The elder women may want to do their things differently. But when it comes to empowering women, we are all women. When it comes to working together, you will also be surprised that there are some young women that really work together very well. For instance, in Harare here, I had a group of young women who have put themselves together. There are 18 of them, young women, who have decided they want to contribute to the market, especially during this lockdown, through producing the PPE, through producing detergents. So each one of them is producing what they do best. They're doing peanut butter, they're doing dishwashing washing liquid, they're doing cleaning liquid, powdered soap, and some of them are in agro-processing and also in meat processing. But they are working together in their own 18 individual projects. These are young women, but they've realized that together they will move. And when we had a lockdown, we were in a process of finding a shop for them so that these 18 products are sold together in a shop that belongs to the 18 of them. But they are manufacturing differently. They could market anywhere, but they come together to share ideas, to also build platforms where they share the markets and any challenges they face, how do they solve them? And it's easier for younger women to be in solidarity through this group, which I learned in Harare, than maybe the elder people who are not quite conversant with the technology.
We need to take a short break. We're going to come back. Please don't forget that point. When we come back, we'll pick up on that. And I think also we've obviously dwelt quite a lot on finances. I think, as you quite rightly say, there are other things that women need during this COVID pandemic. And we also want to see what is being done in that regard. We'll take a short break now and continue this discussion. It is the Rebound series. Do stay with us. Every Zimbabwean wants their country to return to its former glory, and we believe that we have a role to play in doing that. So we'll be speaking to different Zimbabweans from different facets of life to share their views of what it will take to get Zimbabwe to rebound. The Rebound series comes to you every Friday between 5 and 6 p.m. on the Heart and Soul digital platforms. Join me, Farai Mwakutuya, for those incisive discussions. Welcome back. The discussion continues here on the Rebound series. My name is Farai Mwakutuya. My guest is the Honorable Dr. HStvzim, Minister of Women's Affairs, Community, Small and Medium Enterprises. Honorable Minister, before we went to the break, you were stressing a point there, focusing on the young women coming together, solidarity economy. I must admit it's the first time I've heard of it, but clearly sounds like something that is very practical and relevant for markets such as Zimbabwe.
Yes, I think when people come together, they solve more problems than one. I think this solidarity economy it really has solved the problems of isolation, because during the pandemic, women are isolated. But if they work together and they build a platform of 18 of them sharing in their phones what they're facing and what they're doing, it breaks that silence of and also it helps people to avoid being so isolated and loneliness and depressions. And when you are working with other people and you see they are succeeding and you see them rallying around you to ensure that you also succeed, it encourages you. And I think that this solidarity economy, which I have seen being practiced by some of our younger and elder women. In Bulawayo, there is a similar group, but that one is a mixture of both the elder and the younger women. So what they do, they also end up sharing other social challenges they are facing. And I think let's give it to women. Women are part of the gender group that is able to do this, that is able to work with each other and succeed. I know there is this stereotyping that women, they pull each other down and so forth, but I think that we really don't look at the good that women do together.
Indeed.
And this is one of them.
You've spoken about isolation, loneliness, depression. I think if one thing that everyone has learned from this pandemic is the fact that, health is not just about physical. It's also mental health. If you're not physically well, if you're not mentally well, you won't be physically well. So if you're not mentally well, then you can't go out there and earn the money and do the business. So is there something that's also being done to look at the psychological and the mental side of this?
Yes, I think the Ministry of Public Service and also the Ministry of Health, they are dealing with that. These things are interwoven, they are interlinked. If you are a woman that is economically succeeding, it will take care of these other things. So, but if you get to your house, you are alone, you don't have anyone to talk to, you are trying to make a detergent and it's failing, you have no one to ask to, that is a vicious circle. And I think that we have learned as women that let's organize each other around productive activities rather than organize each other just to talk and air out our emotions. That hasn't worked in the past. And I think this new approach that as women in Zimbabwe we are taking of organizing ourselves around specific economic empowering activities, it solves more problems than one, because it takes care of your self-esteem. Here you are, I have produced a bar of soap. So this bar, I can call it anything. I have produced a bottle of sanitizers. I have made masks. I have made clothes. So we are organizing ourselves in these solidarity groups around activities that contribute first to my own self-esteem. That as a woman, here I am, I'm making a contribution to myself, to my family, to my community, to the nation. But also as a group, here we are. We have created this space where we are contributing. And that takes care of the depression you are talking about. And if as women, you just get together, and this is why a lot of men now go back to the home and have gender-based violence, because they gather together to drink. And when they get home, that drink hasn't solved the problem of putting food on your children's table. And yet we as women, we don't gather around just drink. We gather around an activity that will solve some of the problems. And when I get home, I'm bringing with me a bath soap, a powdered soap. I'm bringing with me something that will contribute to my family. So in that way, I have taken care of the economics of my own internal economic challenges. I've taken care of the challenges, economic challenges in the family. And my psyche is also happy because I've achieved. So, and also I have friends. I have someone that I can call. When you meet around these social groups, I'm not condemning that men shouldn't meet and drink. I'm saying, let's change this paradigm of just meeting and drinking. Let's meet as men and as women around activities that we can take to our families. That will also help us feel good about our contribution to society. Just, despite the fact that we are locked down, despite the fact that we can't go out there and work, we can't go out there and express ourselves.
As we head towards wrapping up, this will be, I suppose, a very difficult question, because there is that need to balance versus protecting lives and livelihoods. But you did say that, the activities or your capacity to be able to help women, to assist women, has been hampered by the lockdowns. Now, what is going to happen going forward? Because unfortunately, from what we are seeing, there seems to be this phenomenon where we'll go through a period where infections will come down, but then we go into another lockdown. So these lockdowns will seem to be like they'll be with us for some time. Going forward, how will you get around them? I know it's a very difficult question, but is there a strategy to try and see how you can manage around the lockdowns?
I think that's what I was talking about, that in the younger women, the lockdown hasn't really locked the women down, because they can communicate virtually. They can have their own groups and share information virtually. And I think the lockdowns has also opened other avenues of communication and other ways of work, which we didn't have before. And I think that now adds to the physical contacts that we had before. And there is no way in which we can say this pandemic will go back tomorrow and will go back, in 2 weeks' time. But I think we need also to change the ways in which we relate, the ways in which we think, the ways in which we deal with our own psyche, and the way we do business, either individually or as a group.
Something that has just occurred to me, there might be someone who is watching this program who perhaps didn't know that, there were funds available, that there is this assistance that is available. Where or how can someone go about getting support or assistance? Where do they go, and what sort of projects qualify? Because someone might think, my project is too tiny and I may not be able to. How do people go about accessing this assistance?
Like I said, we've got the Women's Development Fund, where women, there could be 3 of you or 5. You don't need security. You have your project proposal, then you bring that to the ministry, and then there is a committee that will look at the projects. And we try to put funding women and funding SMEs to all our 100 days achievement to cabinet, so that we make sure that this fund goes to the people. And we also have the Community Development Fund, which works in the same way, but this one is smaller than the Women's Development Fund. And we let me just say, with this Women's Development Fund, we have recently supported about 63 women, which translated about $15 million that we have dispersed to women. And we have created 150 jobs despite the lockdown, and 431 direct beneficiaries who belonged to these 63 groups, and 720 indirect beneficiaries. So we are keeping a tag on this so that we make sure that there is an impact. There is also the SMEDCO. SMEDCO is part of the disbursement wing of the 500 million. And so far, SMEDCO has disbursed 136 million to 219 SMEs. These are individual SMEs. And it has, through this, created 360 jobs and sustained about 957 jobs. So as we disperse these funds, we make sure that we really keep a tag for success and job creation, and also that they don't fall back. But the Women's Bank funds also through machines, through assets, and it has done very well. It has dispersed over 12,000 loans to about 12,000 groups. And their portfolio is about 90 million. And this has sustained about 530 jobs.
Wow,
so
fantastic.
this really is I want to encourage people. We are thorough in terms of when we are thorough in terms of disbursement and making sure that we select the projects that we think they will succeed. People shouldn't be impatient. And I want to say this to women. If your project is rejected, go back to SMEDCO, to the bank, to the ministry, and find out why. Don't just ukalale kurama and say, they have rejected me. It is your right to be funded, but also it is your responsibility to be funded correctly so that you succeed. So make sure that both sides work together to find a correct way of funding, but don't turn your back on the bank. The bank was created by the president and by the government of this country for you, not for a woman next door. So if you fail now, go back and find out why you failed. Indeed. And if you have any challenges, this is why, as a minister, I am here. Be in touch with me, and then I connect you to the right people. And I really wouldn't like anyone feeling discouraged and going away, because I know the impact that these funds have had on women, and these funds are there for them. And let's make sure they get to the women, but in a way that will make them succeed.
Indeed. On that note, we must end the discussion here. Thank you so much, Honorable Minister, for joining us. And I like the note on which you ended, where you are saying, don't be discouraged. This money is there for you. You deserve it. Make sure you meet the criteria so that you do get it. Thank you so much, Honorable Minister.
Thank you.
Fantastic. That's been Honorable Dr. Tsvangirai, Minister of Women's Affairs, Community, Small and Medium Enterprise Development. We take another short break now. When we come back, we'll continue the discussion. It is here on the Rebound series. Every Zimbabwean wants their country to return to its former glory, and we believe that we have a role to play in doing that. So we'll be speaking to different Zimbabweans from different facets of life to share their views of what it will take to get Zimbabwe to rebound. The Rebound series comes to you every Friday between 5 and 6 p.m. on the Heart and Soul digital platforms. Join me, Farai Mwakutuya, for those incisive discussions. Welcome back. It is the Rebound series with me, Farai Mwakutuya. I am now joined in the studio by two guests from the Vendors Initiative for Social and Economic Transformation, Rosemary Mudzamiri and Tariro Munyerei, as well as online by Anna Marie Kiaga. She's from the International Labour Organization, a specialist on informal economy. Rosemary, welcome to the program. Tariro, great to have you on the program. Anna Marie, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Ladies who are here in the studio, Rosemary, Tariro, your own experiences, maybe let's speak to that in terms of women who are engaged in informal business. How has this COVID-19 period been? What have been the experiences? How has it made things harder? Has there been any help? Can you tell us how's it going?
Okay, thank you very much. Entity COVID ichitanga last year 2020 muna March somewhere like that. Takava no affectwa kwakati nyanyei. Chokutanga apana kuita notice yokuti mavenda abude mu town. Zvinova zvakatiremera zvakati nyanyei. Takava ne great loss. One, pakurongedza mastaff kuti tiende kuma location kwatinogara. Gudzu rairasika nokuti wakanga usina your own transport inogona kukutakwirira zvinhu zvako. Then by so doing waigona kuita stuck wakaunganidza staff yako. Pakuzoisa mukombi kana mulifti whatever chaunenge wakwanisa kuwana. Chaigona kukukostira zvokuti waizoona kuti maybe staff yacho kuti uende nayo kumba unoitengesa nemari yawachajwa kutakurirwa staff yako hazvizoenderani. Saka ipapo pakava nokunetsa. Vazhinji tiri ipapo taitamba maraundi muno mutown. Taitamba maraundi nevanhu as far as anenge achibva kubudiriro, Glenview, Domboshava, Ruwa. Nokuti isusu mavenda kana tiri pabasa redu tiri hama next vendor. Saka tinobva tatanga kuita ukama kwokutamba maraundi. Pakutamba maraundi tinenge tichitira kuti paunopiwa kana ingava 50 US day iroro unoorder staff yako yakawanda. Saka pakauya lockdown angava munhu aida kutopiwa round that very day or the next day or the next week or end of month, mari iyoyo yakatsakatika. Nokuti tiri muno mutown unenge usingazivi kuti zvatindobva kudomboshava kumba kwake ndokupi, hauna kokumutsvaka. And then by so doing takava negreat loss pakurarama kwedu tichitamba maraundi, mari dzakangonyura dzakadaro. Then tiri papo zvekare tinotumana kunotsvaga staff as far as South Africa, Zambia, even as far as Tanzania. Nokuti mamwe mavenda edu vatova nemamarkets akura. Saka taiunganidza mari dzedu. Ndingava ndinoda masocks, ndingava ndinoda t-shirts, ndingava ndinoda mazambia. Saka anenge achienda anotakura mari dzevanhu 4 or 5. Kupanana majuice okunoorder kitira kuti tisarambe tichita loss yakawanda vanhu vese vakaenda kunoorder. Then by so doing lockdown payakadeedzerwa munhu anga ari kuZambia anokwanisa kudzoka akava stuck ikoko. munhu anga ari on the way kudzoka kunoko akava stuck paboda. Saka zvakati affecta futi zvakanyanya, takabva taita futi another big loss. Then tiri ipapo tatakura zvinhu taenda nazvo kudzimba kwataitengesera kunoko kutown, mumastreets, kumamarkets, kwakabva kwaitwa yatinoti demolishing kana kuti kupaswa, kwakaparadzwa. Within some minutes, some seconds, some hours, pakanga pasisina any form of market. Paunenge uchitengesera pamarketplace yako panga pasisina anything. Saka yakava imwe great loss. Nokuti kuti market yo ivepo, unenge waburitsa futi mari kuti market yo ivepo. Saka tiri kudzimba takutengesa, but kutengesa kwanga kwakatiomera even namanje. Nokuti kumba nearly every house pagedhe pani nani panenge paine table yemusika. Saka patable ipapo you find out domasi randiri kutengesa patable pangu, pagedhe pangu, next gate ine domasi iroro, ine veggie iroro, next gate ine masau, ine domasi, ine lemon, of which kutengerwa kwachona kushoma. And then uri kumba hausisina excess yekutamba maraundi, nokuti ini ndinowana $1 per day, next neighbor yangu $1, haugoni kutamba around nokuzono order at the same time.
Okay, I want to bring you in, Anna Marie, and just to summarize the key issues that have just been raised there by Rosemary. She points out to the fact that, number one, storage was a very big issue because these lockdowns, COVID-19 lockdowns, were announced with very short notice, and so people were stuck with, goods that they didn't know how to move from, their marketplaces to their homes or where to store them. The second issue was the fact that savings clubs that many of them engaged in were disrupted, because if I'm the one who was due to get the $50 on that particular day or that week, I lost out. Supply chains were disrupted because many of these people were getting things from Tanzania and Zambia. People who went there were stuck at border posts, couldn't get their goods across. When people were, which is a phenomenon I think we've noticed whenever you go into some of these high density areas, because people are trying to make a living or to sell from home, virtually every home in high density suburbs is selling vegetables or sweets or biscuits or whatever it is. So the market is flooded. Who are you selling to? There's no one to sell to. And then I think the demolitions is something else that was pointed out, which has also affected market vendors and people in the informal sector. From your own assessments, from your own analysis, do you concur with this? Are there any other issues? And just generally, when you look at what's happened in Zimbabwe, does that tally with what's happening in other markets that are similar to ours, particularly for informal businesses?
Thank you, Farai. I definitely concur with what she has said. But as ILO, as you know, we look at it in a broader sense because vendors is just one category of workers in the informal economy. We look at other categories as well. So when we look at the global data, for example, we find that, when we look at women, how women were affected by COVID, apart from those who are working directly, for example, as vendors who had almost complete loss of income. We have those who are actually employed, but also were affected by this in different ways. So for example, for essential workers, our data shows that 70% of health workers in the world are actually women, and they were affected because then being essential workers, they were at a higher risk of contagion, right? That is one category of workers. And then we also find that most women were working with in the most risky sectors. So accommodation, food services, for example, most vendors, as you're mentioning, they were selling foods. They could not stop selling. They had to continue to sell. That was one way that they were really affected. And those who could not sell at all, there was no immediate mechanism to support them. So that became, again, another factor. So for example, as Rosemary was talking about, the fact that they're flooding the market. So who is going to buy from who? So if no one is buying from anyone else, where are they getting money to sustain themselves? So that also became a problem. But there's another issue, which was after the lockdowns, and the schools were also closed, then everybody's at home and everybody's looking at a woman. So that added, a lot of work on women. Supervision of children. All of a sudden, you cannot even have money to provide what you used to provide all the time. That became a challenge. And in some cases, even in here in Zimbabwe, we noticed that became a cause for a lot of gender violence. So yeah, so when you look at the different categories of workers in the informal economy, we're affected differently, but in general, we see that women were more affected than men. Yeah, generally there. And then so in terms of as she has mentioned, you're an own account, you're getting money for yourself. What can you do in a situation where the government does not know how to reach you, for example? Right. So at least Tariro and Rosemary are members of VSET. So if there is support that the government needs to provide, we can go to the association. But there is a large number that are not organized, that are independent. They work on their own, and there is no way of reaching them with any support. So that compounded the problem. So we know that they are suffering, but we don't know how to reach them. And to be able to provide such support, you want credible information. So lack of information on the people who are operating in the informal economy became also such a huge problem, and continues to be. We are trying to address it, but it continues to be a bit of a challenge. So yes, in short, I think I do agree very much with what she's saying. From the vendor's perspective, but we also need to look at other categories of workers in the informal economy who were also affected in different ways. Over
Indeed.
to you.
Tariro, so how are you coping?
So with VSET, there have been a number of strategies that they've taken on board as a coping mechanism. I remember last year around August, VSET had an online program that was teaching women how to embrace tech platforms, e-commerce, how to still run your business online, even when markets are closed. As it stands, a lot of markets are still being reconstructed. So vendors, a lot of women, informal traders, don't have operating space. So online markets become alternatives. We're using WhatsApp groups, and we have partner organizations that have developed apps that we can use to sell our products. That's one coping mechanism. And the other mechanism that I saw VSET taking on board was that through the COVID-19 task force and local authorities, they pushed for the decentralization of markets, and not just have one particular market and everyone crowding to that one market, but realizing that there's a need to create more working space and that are COVID compliant, and that have the wash services and all the other gendered needs that women might have. And we've been pushing for that through local authorities. I'm sure you saw Gweru has been a very good example. They recently opened their Kudzanai bus terminus, and I think it's a very modern market when you look at it, and it took into perspective some of the issues that were raised by VSET. So I can say those are some of the strategies that have been used to cope with this COVID-19.
I know we need to go for a break, but what I must ask, you use the example of Kwadzana, which I think is great. My worry is how sustainable is that? They may have opened with all this pomp and fanfare saying, look, we've set up the infrastructure, but can it be sustained? A month from now, will they still maintain those standards and those facilities?
I think that's where the relationship between the local authority and the informal trader becomes very important. I think we need to come up with a mutually beneficial relationship where informal traders understand and realize the justification of the fees that they've been asked to pay. And on the other hand, the local authority should be transparent in the process in which they handle the monies that they are receiving from informal traders and provide those services that the informal traders need.
Thank you so much. We need to take a short break now. We'll come back. We'll continue the discussion. We are focusing on the impact of COVID-19 on women, and I suppose looking at how we can build resilience going forward. My name is Farai Mwakutuya. The Rebound series continues shortly. Do stay with us. Every Zimbabwean wants their country to return to its former glory, and we believe that we have a role to play in doing that. So we'll be speaking to different Zimbabweans from different facets of life to share their views of what it will take to get Zimbabwe to rebound. The Rebound series comes to you every Friday between 5 and 6 p.m. on the Heart and Soul digital platforms. Join me, Farai Mwakutuya, for those incisive discussions. Welcome back. It is the Rebound series. Anna-Marie, let me come to you very quickly. I want to pick up on a point made earlier by Tariro, where she's saying, technology obviously has come to the fore under this COVID-19 pandemic and being used to try and find solutions and ways out. I have two questions to you. Number one is, how practical is it, or how easy is it, or how accessible is it for people who've been affected, women who've been affected in the informal sector to make use of technology, given that it's, there are costs to it, there may be awareness and education issues, skills issues, but also, when you look at countries like Zimbabwe that already, face resource challenges, can we be able to robustly support women that need assistance during times like this?
It is a hard question, as you say, because you have countries that are really strapped for resources themselves. So it is becoming a bit of a challenge. However, there are ways of making it work. So, for example, when Tariro was mentioning the use of, online platforms, basically, there is support. There are countries where they worked around for groups of women to work together through a certain platform. So not every woman needs to own a laptop or to own a mobile for a smartphone. They can do that in groups to work. They can use that in groups. So that has been one way to do that. In other examples, for example, we where phone using the phones and other online platform work, they really have helped most women reach out, and Eastern Southern Africa has done very well. We have very good examples, not only in Zimbabwe, Namibia, we have very good platforms. In Lesotho, we have very good platforms going on, and women are really making use of them in order to sell their products. However, when it comes to the other, for traders, this works, right? But what about those who cannot use, as you say, these platforms? They are required to still use the normal, like their markets. So, for example, here in Zimbabwe, what the UN has done, we started working on making sure then the markets where they sell their goods are safer. So we have a whole program working on occupational safety and health. And you had asked the question, how do you sustain this? How do you make sure that they continue beyond just being projects? And basically what we are doing is we are training the women themselves, the market vendors themselves, to learn how to do this. And then we provide the tools that are needed. So where we find there's no water, we make sure there's a borehole nearby so they can have water. Where we find, for example, there's no place for their children to play in a safe place, we make sure there's childcare spaces built up for them. So in that case, in that way, with the peers among themselves, we are sure that they will continue to work they will continue to make sure their working conditions remain well. So apart from focusing on those who can afford, to work remotely, through a platform and all that, we also are supporting those who cannot, those who really are forced to really go to those markets and sell there, but making them safer. So we are looking on both ways.
Indeed. Rosemary and Tariro, earlier I was speaking to the Minister of Women's Affairs, Community and Small Enterprise Development, and she did say that there are funds that are available. I think she said 500 million Zimbabwe dollars is available through Women's Bank, through Small and Medium Enterprise Development Corporation, but through different channels to assist. Are you seeing any of this money?
With the funding opportunities that are there, I think number one, the biggest gap we've noticed is information dissemination. We are not sure where to go to access the funds. the process of applying for the fund. If you get rejected, can they assist you? So I think it's critical that for government efforts like that to be taken on board, there's need for them to engage with communities, come to the ground, to the grassroots, Mbare Msika market, where the women are operating from. Tell them there's a fund that is available. This is how you apply. If you're coming as a group, this is what you need to do to put together as a group. There's no collateral that is needed. But because of this information gap, I haven't seen any women benefiting from the funds that are available in these banking institutions. So I think it's something that they could improve on so that people then start to participate and engage and benefit from such processes.
Rosemary, mabotaro nyaya rounds tatataura ndozvazvitaura minister kuti kana muchiita zvema-rounds muchipanana mari tatuona kuti you are dependable, you are trustworthy because you are getting money from your peers and you are putting it to productive use. Munoona zviri zvinhu zvingasumudzirika here government ikati alright imi muri group renyu muri 10 maita zveround shuya tichikupai loan muchiita business.
Regai nditi isusu semavenda echidzimai tikange tawana mukana wokuti tinogona kuva in groups of 10 or 5 and then topiwa mari a certain amount kuti tikwanise kuhodha staff yakawanda titengese tichengete mhuri zvinogona kutibatsira zvakati nyanyei nokuti tinenge tine vana from ECD primary secondary as far as university. Iwewe nestaff yaunenge unayo haukwanisi kuoccupya zvikamu zvese zvinodiwa kuti uise mari. Why? Nokuti staff dzatinenge tinadzo ndedzemari ishoma. Even ukapuwa round ukanohodha hapana paunozadza table nokuti isusu tinoita hand to mouth every day. Saka unomeka sure kuti pane zvawatengesa ndipo patabvisa zvokudya, ndo pabviswa kagodoke sipo kawacha, ndipo pabviswa mari ye-airtime. Saka zvinobva zvawanda at the same time. But kana tikawanawo ma-opportunities akadaro okuti semadzimai tinopiwawo mari idzodzo, zvinogona kutibatsira zvakati nyanyei. Ende tinogona kubudirira through izvozvo nokuti tinenge takukwanisa kutengesa staff yakawanda at the same time. Tiri ipapo inyaya yokuti like Tyrell was saying zvimwe zvezvinhu zvinogona kusvika kunzeve dzedu but truly speaking tinenge tisingatombozive kuti tinonanga kopi, tinenge tisingatombozive kuti ofisi yatinonotanga kunoka ndeipi, tinenge tisingatombozive futi why nokuti ruzivo vanenge vasina kutanga vatipa ruzivo rwezvinodiwa kuti tizokwanisa kuapply kuti tipiwe mari idzodzo. Sikatogona ngozvinzo zvitaurwa like izvozvo zvanga zvitaura minister like what we were saying, but kana ndabuda muno handina kwandiri kuziva kokuenda kuti ndinokwanisa kuapply ndipiwe mari iyoyo nokuti vanozvitaura asi kuzotizadzisira dzimweni dzenguva zvizadziswi. Saka ndo chikumbiro chinenge chiripo kuti kana paine mikana yakadaro yokuti tinogona kuwana kuti tikwanise kubudirira zvinogona kunge zvakatotiringana semadzimai anoita chivenda.
Anna-Marie, issues to do with information gap, where assistance may be available, but people are not aware of it. Earlier, I was speaking to the Honorable Minister who said, look, there's this solidarity economy model that they are pushing where they're saying women come together, you may not have collateral, but, come together, show that, come in and borrow as a consortium of sorts. That information gap, how best can we get around it? How can it be scaled?
I think if there's one thing that we also learned during these COVID times, that is exactly it, a challenge on how do we make sure people get the information they need. We need to go back to the basics, actually. So, for example, we had community radios. Here in Zimbabwe, I think they're coming up again. How do we make use of things like that? Because now, remember, we are assuming that we are in lockdowns and people are confined in their homes. They cannot go out and see posters, or they cannot, and maybe not everybody can afford to have TV. And if we have maybe a community TV place, at least they can move there. A few people can go there. But we can also use radio to do that, to make sure that people get the information. So far, we have depended so much on a word of mouth, one person telling the other. But I also would like to agree with what the minister is saying, is that bringing them together, the people, the informal economy, as we say, there are many categories and they are in number, you see. So there is no way we could reach each and every one. And therefore, that's why we encourage groupings, we encourage association building, because then it is easy. There's a one channel through which you can get a number of people at the same time. So yes, apart from that, we just need to go to the traditional, we used to use our traditional leaders also to pass on information. We might need to go back to those basics again, just to make sure we can actually reach this huge number of people who are in the informal economy. But also, as you say, but technology is still there. We can't just we cannot just let it go. Like what we are doing today here, I'm sure when you air this, people will hear, and then we'll know that, okay, so maybe this is the way we could do, this is how I can get this information, and this is where I can need to go. So it has to be an integrated approach. We have to use as many channels as possible that we have at hand to make it work. But definitely dissemination of information is a challenge that we really need to address.
Very lastly, I'm going to ask you guys one final round of questions. I'll begin with you, Anna Marie, because you've just been speaking, and as you quite rightly mentioned, there are many different sectors to this informal economy. Are you worried about its survival going forward, given what the COVID pandemic has done, the strain it has brought on livelihoods and people's ability to do business, but also the fact that, people's incomes, the people who would ordinarily patronize some of these businesses don't have the money that they normally have because of lockdowns and things like that? How do we make sure that people in informal business can still survive and continue doing it going forward?
Okay, so that's a very loaded question, because first of all, let me put it this way. Informal economy is not going to go away. It's going to continue to be there, right? We know that. But we need to make sure then going forward, they can actually operate in more in better working conditions. That's one way. And then within them, as I say, because there are many different categories there are others who really just need guidance to make it work. They have a little resources still that can be channeled properly into increasing the work they actually already do. And then among them, there are those who absolutely need social assistance. There is no way out. We have to support them through the period until they are able to stand on their feet again. What we as ILO do is not to make sure we do not consider this whole group as one group. We know there are differences among them, so we just have to capitalize on those differences. So for example, you were talking about Marounds, there are, yes, a lot of women actually try and use this. There are some we have found right now, even in Zimbabwe, that they have exhausted their money, because now all of a sudden they're not earning as much, so they cannot contribute as much, right? But there are others who actually are doing well. The question is, what are we doing with that? How are we helping them multiply the money they have? Can we ask them to, because now they cannot maybe sell, can they diversify the way they actually earn money? So for example, if you already have 10,000, maybe they have $5,000 already. What if we help them take that $5,000 and invest it somewhere? To multiply it, because they cannot get it from selling on a day-to-day basis. So we need to think outside the box, help them diversify their sources of fund or sources of income, and then help them through that. And those who they are not there yet, these are the ones that we make sure they get the assistance they actually need. So within the UN, for example, here in Zimbabwe, we are looking at all of them in different categories, and all of them have a different type of support that they're actually receiving.
Indeed, very good point. Let me ask you, Taro, the point that has just been made, they're diversifying, I think is very important. Perhaps vending, there's just too many people doing it now. And as she said, at every street corner, at every house. So would it be an option where would you be willing to or consider to say, look, maybe with the money I've made through vending, let me now look at another venture, farming, poultry, going into something like that. Are those options, because you're on the ground, you are interfacing with your counterparts. Is this practical? Will this work?
From what I've observed, I think we have two types of vendors. One who is forced into it because of circumstances, and two genuine entrepreneurs who want to grow their businesses and make money. Those are business people. But I think for most of us, with 67% of informal traders here in Zimbabwe being women, I think it's mostly circumstantial vending. Given the opportunity to find formal employment, most of them would go for the formal employment because it's safer. However, I think it is critical for us to start thinking around social protection for the informal sector. Because like Rosemary was saying, most of the money that we have in the informal economy is hand to mouth. There's no social security whatsoever. There are no maternity benefits. I can't afford to take a month off when I have a baby because I don't have that income. So I'm always desperate for the income. So I think it's important for us to start thinking about ways of making the informal economy a bit more sustainable for people who are working in there. How do we do that? Maybe by formalizing the informal economy, helping people who are in the informal economy find ways to make it a sustainable way of earning a living, making the markets safer for them and helping them grow their businesses so that they don't just think of it as a means of survival, but an actual way of earning a livelihood in the country.
Indeed, something that's sustainable beyond, the challenges we are speaking, the immediate and pressing challenges of the pandemic now. I want to thank you so much, Tariro, for coming through and for sharing your sentiments. Anna Marie, great to speak to you, and I think very important points and issues that you raised there, very important, and hopefully going forward we'll start to see some of those being implemented. Rosemary, thank you so much for coming through and for sharing your input. That does it for this program. Unfortunately, we're out of time, so we must end it here. But I would like to thank Anna Marie Kiaga from the International Labour Organization, Rosemary Mdzamire and Tariro Munyere from the Vendors Initiative for Social and Economic Transformation. And earlier on, I spoke to the Honorable Minister, Honorable Dr. Stembiso Nyoni. My name is Farai Mwakutia. This program has been brought to you by the HStvzim She Leads project with support from the Embassy of Ireland in Pretoria. I'll be back again to do this next time. Be sure to join me then. Bye-bye.
This program was brought to you by the HStvzim She Leads project with support from Embassy of Ireland in Pretoria.